Good afternoon, and welcome to the next session that we have in our workshops on organization and leadership. This section is titled "Planning for Tomorrow." Looking forward to hearing how these folks have been doing the planning in their organization. I'm Ray Sheen. I'll be moderating. We have on our panel Gerald Huebner, chairman of GHEX, and Mariusz Dzieciatko. Well, hopefully I'm close. Okay, very good from Poland, and then Karin van Oostrum from South Africa. I'll let each of them provide a little bit more of their background as they then start on their talks. And Gerald, we can start with you.
Thank you, Ray. It is so good to be here and to be able to share together. And I'm hoping that this session will be one where we can do some sharing, where we can do a bit of back and forth and some question and discussion, because I get tired of listening to myself. My name is Gerald Huebner. I am the father of two children. They're both grown, 40 years old and 42 years old, and have four grandchildren. The oldest is 17, the youngest is 8. And it's been our joy as a family to be involved in home education. Not every day, but most days. It's something that we've done together as a family and been involved in leadership in various capacities at a provincial level. So our province of Manitoba, which is right in the center of Canada, we've been involved in that for over 35 years. And this year I accomplished a life goal, and that was to resign from that and to turn it over to a new board, which happened in March. So that was exciting, and it showed me that it is possible. We're involved on a national basis in HSLDA, Homeschool Legal Defense Association of Canada, and here globally with GHEX. I've had the privilege, and sometimes the curse, of being part of probably 45 different boards in various capacities. I was involved in agricultural science for many, many years. And there were many different organizations. And I've had I would say 80% of them were very boring. 80% of them were quite painful. And so some of the things I'm going to share are more sharing not so much the negative experiences, but the lessons learned from some of those experiences over the years. I would say that I would boil down the issues that I've seen with boards and organizations. So some places they'll be called a board or a committee, comes in various labels. But I would say that the issues I would pull down to three things. And that's, first of all, a lack of a common purpose. You get a group of people that meet together, but all too often they're meeting together for very different purposes. They get together, and this person is there for this, that person is there for that, the other person is there for that, and commonly, I find many times they don't really have very much in common. And that leads to many challenges. The second problem, and the biggest one in my view, is simply a lack of communication, where people are not talking to each other about things that they really are concerned about. Everybody talks about each other. Everybody knows who the problem is because it's so obvious to them. It's not necessarily the right thing, or that's not necessarily the fact, but it's a lack of communication. And I guess one of my rules is don't do anything about me without me. If it's something that I'm concerned about, if it's something that I need to know about, tell me. Because I've over and over had people who, everybody in an organization, and I led an organization with 600 staff, everybody in the organization knew that there was a problem with this person or these couple of people. Everybody knew it. Everybody talked about it. I had the privilege of going to those people and saying, we need to talk. We need to sit down and have a chat about these things. And invariably, the people would say, nobody's ever talked to me about this. Nobody ever told me. I think I knew that there was something wrong because it was kind of weird, but largely they would say, nobody talked to me. And there isn't a magical formula for how do you do that. How do you have difficult conversations? It's like eating an elephant one bite at a time. You just start, and you might start at the wrong end, but at least you start. And then you communicate, you talk, and you find out from that person, what are they concerned about? Because there's always, anytime you've got multiple people, you've got a number of versions of what happened. And to me, that's very indicative of an organization, a board, a committee, a group, where there's a lack of communication. And communication to me is simply being able to sit and listen as well as talk and be able to get an understanding. And there all too often that's combined with other layers. I've seen it so often where there's a lack of understanding of what is my role. Okay, I'm sitting on this board. I may have been there for a number of years, but I'm not really sure what I'm doing here. Like I come to meetings, I get the minutes, I participate as I can, but to sort of say, so what is my role? What is my job? What do they actually need from me? Why am I here? I think that's a fairly common frustration, because at the end of the meeting, people go away and they kind of say, well, what happened? I read the minutes, but what really happened? And that happens all too often in my experience. Now, there are wonderful opportunities that I've had to be part of a group of people that openly communicated, where they said to me, Gerald, when you said this, do you know how that made me feel? They said, when you brought up that point, and it was a good point, but the way that you did it, it wasn't criticizing me, but it made me realize that communication is not just the words I say, but how I say it and how I carry myself and when I do it in a meeting. So to me, the great boards are the ones where that open and transparent communication happens, that goes beyond the agenda, that goes beyond the motion, but it goes to the point of saying, okay, we can actually connect. We can actually talk to each other about how we are functioning as fellow board members. And to me, that's what I strive for. It's not easy, because it means sometimes you raise something up with someone that you're not quite sure how this is going to go, but you need to do it. The other thing that I think is an issue on many boards and many organizations is that we come there as a group of individuals. So we may come representing some other organization or some role that we have. Karin comes to the African or to the GHEX as from Africa. But we many times come not just because we wear a hat representing something, and it's not always clear sort of why am I there, and to understand what's my job, what's my role, and then to be trained, to be briefed, to be clear so that we both all understand what those things are. So those are some of the issues that we have. What can we do about that? We can communicate. One of the things that I found to be most effective is to do a board evaluation, where the board says, okay, I'm not having fun. I'm actually not enjoying this, or I am. And these are the things I find good and enjoyable, and these are the things that I feel threatened by. These are the things that I feel are not going so well. And in particular, evaluate the executive and the chairperson. And it's not easy for a chairperson to get a scorecard and an evaluation that says, you're not listening to everybody. You're not doing a good job of following the agenda. And those are the kinds of things. But it's important for us to be able to clearly evaluate each other in terms of how are we doing. For people to say, I don't feel listened to. Those are important. One of the things that is needed, in my view, in a board is drama. We engage in drama. We engage in issues. We engage in things that we care about. To have something that will allow people to engage at a level that is somewhat emotional. Now, one of the ways you can do that is by one of my friends in his leadership, he likes to create conflict in a creative way. To have something that people can not fight about, but can wrestle with. And the challenge is to have the ability to debate in a creative way and to be able to have the boundaries that are around that and to do it safely, but to do it in a way that truly engages and doesn't just disengage. The other thing that we're supposed to talk about is a bit about strategic planning. And strategic planning to me is part of the job, the role, the function of organizational leadership. And the biggest challenge that I see in strategic planning is we have all sorts of models and systems that get in the way, that prevent us from being able to really think clearly and simply about what it is that we are. And I think the biggest thing is starting by, so what's the actual need? Yeah, we have an organization, we have various things, but what's the foundational need? What's the reason why we exist to be able to take this on? For home education organization, it may be legal, it may be curriculum, it may be support, it may be a combination of those things, but not necessarily. It's a matter of which of those needs are you going to focus on. You can't do it all. There aren't enough good people to do all the good things that need to be done. So how do you choose that? To me, that is the process of strategic planning. Simply in narrowing the field enough to say, this is the thing that we are going to do. And then how are you going to do it? And when are you going to do it? Those are really the things. And then evaluating that, because something that was the plan 5 years ago, the world changed over the last 5 years. We all know that. Between pandemic and various things, we live in a different world now. So for us to re-examine that and say, in this day, what does it look like now? What do we do now? And I don't think it's a whole lot more complex than that, but it is something where we regularly and often look at saying, how can we adapt and how can we constantly reevaluate, renew our plan, and then be able to go back and redevelop that and rejig our ability to do those things. So what do we try to do? We're a group of people. All too often people will come forward and say, well, I'm speaking on behalf of the board. Do you actually have the approval and the authority of the board or the committee to do that? Or are you just sort of making it up as you go along? The board is an entity. It is an it that exists only when it's together. Separate from that, you're a board member. The board can give authority to members to act, to speak, to do things, but then it becomes a matter of have you actually talked about that? And that's where the common communication then can translate into the board authority to do something. But the board is an it is an entity. And I think that's something that many boards, any individuals in boards lose sight of. And they're not necessarily clear on saying, have we granted the authority to Karin to be able to do things in our name in the place where she's then representing us? And that's where it translates down into those things. So with that, I'll stop and look forward to the things that my colleagues will be sharing. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Gerald. Based on some of my experiences, that strategic planning will create drama. And that's, so you can get that drama going that way. Okay, next, Mariusz, would you come and share with us?
Okay, a few slides from me. A little different perspective. My name is Mariusz Dzieciatko. I'm from Poland. I am a president of the association Education in Family Association, and my journey with the home education started in 2006 when we have the problem with our middle boy. Because they go to the school and we see many problems after the first month in this school. So we try to find something to solve this problem. And in this way, we go to the home schooling, and the journey is going on still. Our children are now all the adults. I have 3 children, 2 boys and 1 girl. But we decided to continue this journey and to help other families to know this possibility and to work for the better regulation in Poland. So my specialization from this beginning of our journey in home education was to work with the politicians, to change the law. We start our association in 2007, and our first experience was that in 2009 we changed the law, and it opened the way to increase the number of homeschoolers in Poland. So from when we started in 2006, I think it was no more than 50 children in Poland in home education. Now we have 51,000. So it's a huge change. But okay, what I want to say today, be prepared. I would like to share with you my experience of the last 17 years of working to improve the law in the field of home education. At that time, we had 4 major battles in Poland, 3 wins and 1 loss, but in which the proposed restrictions were minimized. During the last major reform of the education system in 2016, the longest discussion in Polish parliament concerned home education. It was about 3 hours. So I think that today politicians in Poland of all parties know that trying to introduce new restrictions on home education will not increase their popularity. Oh, it's not work. Sorry? Okay, I will start. The old proverb says, best form of defense is attack. Or other, you want peace, prepare for war. So, what kind of war is this that we are fighting? What battles we will have to fight? Who or what is our enemy? First of all, we are not fighting against people. I think this is a very important thing. Our enemy is not the government, politicians, journalists. Oh, good. Thanks. What we are fighting for is the freedom to choose the education of our children in the line with our beliefs and values. We struggle with the fear of the unknown. We fight stereotypes. We fight to preserve basic human rights. We are fighting for the future of our children. And that's why we need to be prepared. To prepare, it is worth asking yourself, I think, 5 questions. If you are at the beginning of your journey, consider the form of organization. You can, of course, act alone, but you will achieve better results by representing a group of people, foundation or association. For politicians, from politician points of view, these 2 forms are not the same. I have the impression that foundations are treated like a monarchy and association like a democracy. So associations have more influence than the foundations. The next question is how to get to the goal. Revolution or evolution? The all or nothing approach or the path of small steps? Looking at the history, revolutions can be very bloody and rarely lead to the previously agreed goal. Evolution is a longer path requiring patience, but giving a greater chance to increasing the population of home educators, and as a result, increasing the ability to influence society. The next question is what we want to achieve and when. How do we want to achieve this? It is worth preparing and writing down a short and long-term plan. Question 4. The next step is resources, which are mainly people. Of course, we also need funds, but today I will focus on people. Look for people around you who are politicians, journalists, lawyers, who use social media efficiently, or who have some relationships with them. If you don't find such people, start taking part in events where such people appear and look for opportunities to talk. If you are talking to someone for the first time, don't start with your demands or frustration. Try to tell your story, what you live for, your patience. What we need. The fight for home education is a long-term action. You will need a lot of information that you probably didn't need before, like me. Look for information on how your country works and what the legislative process looks like. What is the difference between government projects and the projects submitted by MPs or senators? When can you submit your comments and suggestions? How you can participate in the legislative process? What is the hierarchy of importance of MPs in individual parties, etc., etc.? How can you engage the media? How to prepare press releases? How to prepare the interviews? A good idea is to prepare 3 topics that we want to talk about before each speech, and then agree our answer to the question in such a way as to reveal to the world what is most important to us at a given moment. Regardless of the narrative imposed by journalists, beware of questions that are outside our scope of expertise. This is one of the journalists' methods of leading us into the wilderness. You don't have to answer every question. And another aspect is that you will need an effective method of communicating with other homeschooling families. So choose the right platform for you. My association currently has a Facebook or Meta group of over 70,000 people. And as the conclusion, be prepared for. Give the definition of home education in 30 seconds. You can try. I think I have time, so you can try now. Please use a small piece of paper and try to write in this 30-second definition of home education, clear definition of home education. Another thing, give a 3 arguments why home education is good. Another one, provide arguments appropriate to the listener, not just any arguments, but arguments who is good for your listener. And of course, answer the question about socialization. It's the main question. And be positive and be a good listener. Thank you.
Thank you. Those 5 questions, I think, are a very good place for any of us to start. Most of our organizations, at least the ones that I've been involved with, we started from that legislative standpoint, dealing with the law. But once the law was changed, then we had to rethink, what's our purpose? What are we doing? Why are we now have an organization? And it is a significant strategic change that happens then. Karin, please.
So my name is Karin van Oostrum. I'm from South Africa. And in South Africa, homeschooling has been legal for a long time, but I'm just going to give you some background about how the Pestalozzi Trust that I represent, aside from AHEX and the GHX, came into existence. So in 1992, my husband and I started the Association for Homeschooling. At that stage, homeschooling was still illegal in South Africa, so everything was done below the radar. And it was a small association. Everybody fitted into our sitting room, sort of onto the couch and a few chairs. So it was a tiny organization, but from that association, we started working for the legislation of home education and to spread info about home education, etc., etc. But when you think about this, your strategy, because I would like to share some strategic strategic planning issues that we found are very useful in our journey. You have to decide what the goal of your association is, as my fellow speakers have pointed out. So in the case of the association, there were many goals. We wanted to inform everybody homeschooling is the best thing that you can do. Here are some resources, curriculum materials, and we fight for the law. So there were a number of goals that we tackled at the same time. Then when homeschooling became legal in South Africa in 1996 with the South African Schools Act, we saw that actually we would need some teeth to fight for the legalization of home education in South Africa. So we contacted the HSLDA and we made friends all over internationally, and that led to the foundation of the Pestalozzi Trust in 1998. The Pestalozzi Trust, we took the name from Johann Heinrich Pestalozzi, the Swiss educator who said, who really valued, he said, my aim in life is to make it possible for every mother to be able to teach her child again. And in South Africa, we have many languages. We have 11 official languages. So we thought, okay, so we can't take something in Afrikaans or English or Zulu or Xhosa or whichever language. Let's take something from Switzerland. So, so we decided on the Pestalozzi Trust, and over the years, the Pestalozzi Trust has become sort of the silent watchdog, just watching the government. And since then, up till this today, nobody has actually been prosecuted for not being registered as the law requires. So forgive me if I forget a word now and then. I'm actually Afrikaans speaking, so just be patient. And we contribute that, the fact that we actually had a very peaceful life, just to the mere existence of something like a legal defense fund in a small country. We're a tiny organization compared to the HSLDAs in the other countries. But the mere existence made the government just a bit careful not to bother us too much. So, so on the one hand, what we realized then when we started the Pestalozzi Trust is that the goals of the association and the Pestalozzi Trust were now changing. The Pestalozzi Trust were going to have a more focused on legalization, the association on support group, info, curriculum, etc., etc. And that's important when you try to plan strategically for your organization. You have to have a good focus. The other thing that when you talk about strategy, which is actually a military term, is you must know your enemy. Who are you actually trying to fight against? In Africa, we have a very real enemy in the Abidjan principles. You might have, you might know about that, but the Abidjan principles, you can look that up on the internet. I don't have a link for you, but it's easy to look it up. It was developed to address and curb the growing privatization of education, and that includes home education. So it's actually developed from South Africa, and it's spread over Africa in many governments in Africa. You'll find that they say, but sorry, the Abidjan principles prefer us to do education this or that way. So I'll just read somewhat about that. It advocates for stringent oversight of private education, including home education. And they call for comprehensive regulatory frameworks that cover various aspects, such as curriculum standards, teacher qualifications, and assessment methods. And these principles aim to create a uniform education system, ensuring that all children receive the same quality of education, whether in public schools or through home education. So you can just hear when I read that, it's exactly the opposite of what we're trying to attain in home education, where you're looking at as the education that fits a specific child at a specific time of his life in specific circumstances, not a uniform kind of education, which in the end is no use. So in the end, there are 6 strategies that we found very useful in the past, because from 2014, our lives started changing in South Africa from a very peaceful, drifting sort of sitting on the sand at the beach kind of home education to a very threatened home education in South Africa, when they started developing the Bella Bill, the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill. So what they want, they are trying to amend is they want to take away the rights of the school governing bodies. So there's a large section of the school population which are up in arms, and then they want to change home education to get it in line with school education, with stringent curriculum requirements and assessment on monitoring. And we've been, actually it was very, in our organization, my husband used to be the leader, Leonard van Oostrum. He was a very well-known leader in South Africa, and he died on the 13th of October 2016. A year later, on the 13th of October 2017, the Bella Bill was published for comment. And our main strategy was to slow down the process, not to prevent it from getting through the National Assembly and prevent it from getting through the National Council of Provinces, etc. And it has been so successful that it is actually stopped now before the president has signed it, because just before that, there was a new election of a new government in South Africa, and it is now, the president still hasn't signed it. And for us, that was really, the hand of God. We could see that very well, that he hasn't signed it, and it maybe has to be referred back to the National Assembly, the Parliament, and the whole process might start from the beginning. So I'll just mention a few. I see my time is also... Okay. So the 6 strategies that we found very useful is the first one, understanding the constitutional provisions in your country, and then start reviewing your national education laws. Sometimes we just take that for granted, but actually there can be very useful information in your national education laws that you can use. Number 2, understanding the legislative process, how laws are made. That's something that I also got to know, once we started working with the Bella Bill. And then another thing is how education policies are implemented at the administrative level so that you can work with the officials besides the politicians. Then we found also that that we could understand if we could understand the current political climate better and the positions of the various political parties on education, we could start working with individual politicians, and that has been very successful if you can get into a personal relationship with politicians, as Mariusz also mentioned. And then the other one, another one, is making use of the international human rights treaties that so many countries are signatories to. And another one, for instance, in Africa is very useful to respect the cultural context and look for localized solutions. For instance, in our case, we are now faced with many children ending in children's homes, and they are applying for home education. Usually that a family would do. In South Africa, home education is defined as education in the child's own home. So strictly speaking, legally, a child in a children's home can also receive home education, can be registered. But that's a quite new section in the law that the officials actually don't know what to do about. And then one of the very important one is to be prepared for sudden changes in the government, whether positive or negative. So in conclusion, home education organizations must be at the forefront of the fight for educational freedom. By strategically understanding and leveraging insights into our country's legal and political systems, we can meet the challenges posed by organizations advocating for strict regulations on education, like the Abidjan Principles. As organizations, we can together create a world where home education is recognized and valued as an essential part of the educational landscape, offering families the freedom to tailor their children's education to their unique needs and aspirations. So we found our battle cry should be educational freedom for families. Thank you.
Thank you, Karin. As you were talking about make sure you know the educational law, I was reminded one of the state organizations that I helped to found back in the U.S., we were fighting a legislative battle. The legislature was going to put in place the pages of regulations. And we went through and found that in the original founding constitution of the state of Connecticut, there was a line that said, children are the responsibility, the parents are responsible for the education of their children. And we said, oh, wait a minute, it's in the Constitution. You can't do that unless you amend the Constitution. Well, they weren't going to go there. And we just eliminated the entire discussion on it, but it was because we had looked into that. And exactly. So I just wanted to reinforce, make sure you know that. Okay, we're open now for questions. Anyone with any questions for anyone on the panel? Yes. Let me, can you run the mic for us? But then they use that one for answering. So there's no one in the back. If you could grab that for us and run the mic, I'd appreciate that. Absolutely.
I have a question that each of you could answer. Now, you two have been involved in your organizations for a long time, and you've been involved in many. How are you planning for succession? When you are no longer, when it's time for you to hand off the reins to someone else, what is your plan? Do you have one? Are you in the middle of enacting one? Could you describe that or your experience with that? Oh, I think you've got one right there.
The mic right there will work fine.
So in our case, we are a trust, and we have 5 trustees. We are a perpetual trust, so the trustees elect the next trustees again. So we are now in the process of getting more trustees, young people, you know, sort of 30 years younger than I am, but people that we have already been training for some time. Yeah.
From my perspective, I think all starts with the dreams. And next step is to materialize these dreams. So to materialize these dreams, it is not enough to have the resources. It's not enough to have the knowledge, but you need to know the time, because not all the time is good for some changes. So all these things connected together give you the way to the success.
I found that the transition is somewhat like the process of our children leaving home. We need to be able to recognize that they will do things differently from us. They will take different approaches. And that I think it's a mental process for us to accept that, to say, not only is that okay, but we need that. We need people that will take a different approach and can do things in a way that I could never do them. So what did we do? We had committees that we set up that would give people experience, exposure, and the opportunity to learn more, to see what this thing is all about. And then it's a progression, get them involved in various things. But then there comes a time when you're never ready for it, when they're never fully prepared for it, when they don't know everything they need to know, but it's time. And then it's a matter of just saying goodbye, step aside, let somebody else take over, and then they will learn just like we did. And sometimes it's not a lot more complicated than that. But it's a real huge relief when you have somebody take over.
Right. Is there another question? Cam?
Well, I don't know if I even can question that, but I just try. Maybe for Gerald, what about how do you deal with kind of transcendent issues? I mean, people are different. People changes also, and I was at several boards. I remember once I was on a board, one of 4, and one of the board members turned out to be an esoteric person. So all of a sudden we were in a huge battle, court case, and she came. I saw that so clearly. We have to do this and this and this, otherwise we fail. So it was not scary for me at all, but the other 2, they got so scared about what she said. She had a higher information or whatever, you know. So it was totally not logic what she said. Totally out of the frame, actually. But the other ones, they got so scared about it, so they overvoted me, of course. So they did it, and we lost, of course. But there's also in the Christian movement too. I mean, I was on a board, and all of a sudden some of the Christian people, they turned to be more charismatic. And they have kind of, I don't know, God put this and that on my heart, and you have dreams and whatever. And sometimes it's so unlogic. I mean, when we work on court cases or something, it has to be intelligent and I mean, I am a Christian. I'm counting on God's blessing, but God gave us the understanding to work with, a head to work with, right, and the intelligence. But how do you deal with such people? Because you can't discuss the issue because it's something they have to do. You know, I don't know if you understand my question.
I think I understand. The thing that I would recommend, first of all, is to have purposes in the organization that are foundational. To say, this is what we believe, this is what we stand for, this is the way that we will approach different subjects. And so, as an example, in the organization in our province, we have an educational philosophy statement. Parents are responsible. We don't take money. There's a number of guiding principles on how we do things. And those, everything can be changed in the organization, but some things are much harder to change and need to be much harder to change in the ways that they can be amended. And I think that's important. We are, as an organization, in the boards that I currently serve on, none of them are democratically elected from the general membership of the organization. They are self-perpetuating boards. So the board replaces itself according to principles that are guided by the Constitution. A new board can change things eventually, but it's guided by those principles, and I think that's important. The other thing for a Christian organization, which I think are often more complicated, because it's dealing with heart things many times. What I would suggest is to say a homeschool organization is not a church, and sometimes tries to be one, and tries to make judgments or calls that go beyond the purposes of that educational purpose of the organization. And I think it's a matter of saying, that's not our thing. Somebody else could deal with those things. That's, our thing is this. And to keep that focus on those things, I think is important. And then the other is a very simple one. Have a way that you can kick people off your board. If you come to a place where you simply say, we disagree, it happens. It will happen. Have a way that you have, before you have a disagreement, a way to say, this is the way that we will deal with disagreements so that we can, as an organization, not die, because a disagreement can kill an organization if you don't have a way of dealing with it. Have a way to deal with it, part ways, try to do it with grace and with agreement and with love, but there's a time when you have to say, we disagree, you need to leave.
Any other comments from the panel?
Well, I can maybe make a comment. We are not attorneys, on our staff. So we have specialized groups of attorneys that we consult depending on the kind of case that we're dealing with, say, with a children's court case or a constitutional whatever. So in such a case, when we disagree amongst ourselves, we refer to the advocate's opinion, the legal opinion that has been worked out. So often there's some disagreement on, is that really the only way to interpret the law, whatever. But since none of us are, really knows better than the senior advocates, we have agreed to abide by the senior advocate's interpretation of the situation and the law.
Okay, are there other questions? You have another one, Kim? I do. Okay.
I'd be interested to know, does any of your board members, your council, whatever you call them, do they have training? Do you do any training for them so they can do better in their role? And if you do, how do you do that? Training of your board members.
We should. And if you don't, it leads to trouble. Because just people, you get some people that have been on there for many, many years, and there's so many rules that are never written down and just ways that we do things culturally in different organizations. And when somebody else breaks the rule, even though there wasn't any known, discussed, trained rule, then it becomes very upsetting. So that training and that briefing on those things is really, really important. And it takes time and effort to do that. So that's one of the board of GHEX is meeting on Sunday night and Monday. And that's one of the things that I'm going to be bringing up is how can we properly now train new board members that are coming on and even board members that are here now, because we got so many things that we say, well, they're not doing things properly, but nobody ever told them.
I think some training is by observation. So if you have the time and the new members can observe the older members, I think this is one of the way.
We assume that people who are eligible for succession as trustees in our organization or executive members are very well grounded in home education. So that's the first qualification. They need to be seasoned home educators, because otherwise you have to, in home education you pass through various seasons. So they should be homeschoolers for longer than 2 years or 4 years. All those milestones that when people feel that actually this was not a good idea, I think let's put them back into school, or I want to change my curriculum, or all those milestones. So they have to be seasoned home educators, and that normally that solves many problems.
I had another question I wanted to ask our panel. Each of you mentioned the importance of strategy. Can you describe what does a strategy look like? When strategy is a term that means many things to many people. Do you have a written strategy, and what are the elements of that strategy?
I think I taught a little bit on my slide, because for me, strategy is, for example, the choice of the way how you want to realize or materialize your dream. So, for example, this choose revolution or evolution is some kind of strategy that you need to choose. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we have various strategies for various elements in our organization. For instance, research strategies from the environment, challenges that we need to solve in the environment. And as most of you should maybe have encountered, we are battered with lots of critique from opposing elements in the homeschooling community. For one thing is the fact that we ask people for money, even though it's a small amount of money every month, but we've been, it causes so many problems that they feel, well, we're taking people's money, why do we do that? So there are various aspects, and the legal strategy and all the various aspects that we deal with. We have various strategies that we work out and then try to break that down again into steps that we try to attain, say, every quarter or annually.
Good question, Ray. We, in several organizations that I'm involved with, both provincially and nationally, and starting to be globally, we have a strategy. And the strategy would start by saying, what do we believe to be important? What do we believe to be our part of addressing that thing? So what's the need? What's our part in addressing that need? What's our vision and purposes in getting there? It was about 7 or 8 points that would say these are the things that we feel called to do to address the need of, for example, homeschool parents across Canada. And then it's a matter of saying, in the next 6 months, what are we going to do? In the next year, what are we going to do? In the next 5 years, what are we going to do? In the next 10 years, what's our long-term vision? The challenge with it is having a document that's about this thick, 12 or so pages, that it's nice, it's done, we got a plan, but the plan gets old, and it has to be continually renewed because time goes on and things change, and it's a matter of how do you turn that from a paper document into a living document that actually finds purpose and traction within the organization.
Okay, we have time for one more question. We have, can we run the mic back? Thank you.
I think my question is a follow-up to strategy. What is your strategy to get more board members, to get more committee members? And what do you say to that person looking to help? How do they find the right organizations to be a part of?
I've got the mic in my hand, so I'll start. What we do is we started by getting a group of people that we knew because of conversations, because of experiences, want to be more involved. So we have a meeting, we get them together and we say, here's what we're thinking about. We want you to think and pray and consider how you could be involved. And then it's a 6 to 12 month process of them meeting with us several times to say, how can we work that together? Interviewing them and developing a onboarding process to say what part. For some people, they don't want to be in the board; they want to be on a committee. So it's finding the right place and involving them in it. We started out with 12 couples, and we narrowed it down, partially by their own selection, narrowed it down to 4 couples that were willing to step directly onto the board and take over, and that took a year.
Any other panel member? Anyone else? Okay, well, then we'll take one more question.
Jake Swart from Canada. There's 2 types of boards, a working board, a policy governance board. I just wanted to ask which kind you have, when you think which one is appropriate, and maybe whether you have paid staff or when you should consider paid staff.
I think there's more than 2, Jake. There's working boards and then there's non-working boards. I recognize the distinction. I would say that the boards that I'm a part of, some are governance. So some cases, like HSLDA Canada, we have paid staff. And we also rely on volunteers. In other cases, we don't have any paid staff, on the case of the provincial organization. And then it becomes a bit of a mix, because it's a matter of recognizing when am I acting as a part of this working board, really as staff, carrying out a function, and when am I sitting wearing my governance hat in overseeing the organization as a whole, because it becomes a mix. And I think when it's a mix, it becomes important to say, okay, right now I am acting as staff, I'm acting as an agent of the board, but not necessarily because I'm a board member. So it's, a hybrid does happen, and it can work as long as you recognize the difference.
Other members, anything to add to that?
We don't have any paid staff.
There's always a point that the enthusiasm of non-paid people diminishes, and then they find that actually the work is too much for them to do it without remuneration. So that's always a problem for me. I don't have an answer to that. I would like to know how other organizations handle that.
That sounds like that's an excellent question for another session, because we're out of time. But we can, those of you with questions in that area, we can stay. I can talk to that, at least some with those who have some more questions in that area. But thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it. And we want to thank our panel members.